Brian Kelly talking about a number of things. First of all, the injury news was good. Major Burns cleared to play. He is going to be in the game plan. Garrett Dellinger, day to day, soft cast on the hand. The real problem is the knee, so wouldn't expect him to start. But if he's available to them, that can't possibly hurt. They got questions about John Emery and Jack Besh. Listen, um, they're fine young men and all that stuff. They are not at they have not at any point been major parts of any game plan this year. Emery's the fifth leading rusher on the team. His big game is 45 yards. Besh is the ninth leading receiver. His big game is 43 yards against New Mexico. I'm happy to get updates on these guys. I hope they do well. Quite frankly, they have not been a big part of what LSU's been doing. So I'm happy to get them back if they get back. But if they're not there, you probably won't notice because they have been out for most of the time. Talked about getting off to a good start. We've had a lot of good jokes about this over the years. You know, why would you not want to get off to a good start? But Kelly's going so far as to changing up his pregame routine, quizzes or whatever. Remember before the game in the Superdome, said, "Hey, we're going to go do a little, not quite, a little bit more than a walkthrough in the stadium that morning, break a sweat, get everybody going." Don't know if they still do that every single game exactly like they were doing the Superdome, if they changed that thing up a little bit. I can't imagine that LSU doesn't come out ready to play. They may get beat, but I can't imagine that being in that stadium on a Saturday night against Alabama, the SEC West title within your grasp, and you're not ready to go 100% from the beginning. I mean, there's just no way you can be flat for this game. Of course, they came out flat for Ole Miss, and I said the same thing. So maybe I don't know what I'm talking about, but I just can't imagine a night game in Tiger Stadium against Alabama with this much riding on it that you come out flat. Doesn't mean you don't make mistakes. I mean, you may come up overhyped and make a mistake, bust a coverage, have a turnover, whatever. So they know the problem. They're trying to address the problem. It's not one of those things where, hey, do this. It's not like fixing a defense. Like, okay, we got to replace this guy with that guy, and then it's fixed. How you get everybody coming out and everything clicks, I don't know. I think that's really tough for coaches. He talked about the Bryce Young problem. Young's a fantastic football player. His improvisational skills are just one of the things that makes him an issue. We talked about in the podcast a little bit this morning. Are you going to put a spy on him? Yes, sometimes. Are you going to rush him in different ways? Yes, you have to. Are you going to show him different coverages? Yes, you have to, because if you don't, he'll figure out what you're doing and he'll beat you. The Alabama program under Saban has not always had elite quarterbacks. They have won with some very average quarterbacks. This is not the case this year. Young is a better player at this point in his career than Jalen Hurts was when he was at Alabama, and Hurts was the offensive player of the year in the league. He is a better player at this point in his career than Tua Tagovailoa was at Alabama, and Tagovailoa was a top 5 pick in the NFL draft, and he's playing at a higher level than both of them. There have been times this year where Young has picked up Alabama and put them on his back, and if you don't need any more evidence than how important he is and how good he is, go watch the Alabama A&M game. It was a 2-point game. You've seen enough of A&M, you've seen enough of Alabama to know that if Bryce Young plays in that game, it's a 21-point game. I mean, Alabama's going to beat Texas A&M by 3 touchdowns if Bryce Young plays in the game. It's my opinion. He's that much better. He got asked a question about what he thought of this rivalry in watching it from afar, when he was at Notre Dame. And he gave a good answer. He talked about the historical significance of it and the, being original teams in the Southeastern Conference. This is how I would have answered. And I don't have to, I don't have to tone it down a little bit in the hopes of not creating bulletin board material. I would just tell you that this game has produced more talent, more professional talent than any series that I have ever seen in college football over, say, a decade's time. The only one that comes close to it to me is when Florida State and Miami were both in their heyday. That was pretty close. When Oklahoma and Nebraska were in their heyday, they didn't send this amount of players to the league. And right now in college football, other than Ohio State and now Georgia, there's no other two teams that you can put on the field that have more representation in the NFL. So that's what I would say to you there. Talked about protecting Jaden Daniels. That they're going to have to move the pocket some. They're going to have to help those tackles. Will Anderson's a problem. He has not had statistically the type of year that maybe you thought, but part of that is probably because of the attention that is paid to him. He is a fantastic football player. Kelly said that they would do some max protect somewhere. Matt Flynn is cringing, but you got to change it up. Just like you got to change up the coverages on what Young sees, you got to change up the protections. Otherwise, they'll figure out what you're doing. And well, Saban's really good at exploiting your weaknesses. He'll make you go to the left hand. He'll make you drive left if he thinks that you can't do it. So they're going to have to help the offensive line out. They know that for sure. I was interested. I think it would be a great question to ask Brian Kelly in the offseason when he could probably get into a little bit more depth. It's a little bit more relaxed when he was asked about the phone call with Nick Saban. See, that's a phone call I would have liked to have listened to. These two guys privately getting to tell you what they really think about things. These two guys that have won, combined over 500 games in college football. Nick, give me your honest opinion on the LSU job in football in the Southeastern Conference. I would have been fascinated to hear what Saban would have told him. And not what Saban will tell us that he told him, or not what Kelly will tell us that Nick told him, because I don't expect him to divulge a private conversation. That's not fair. But I think that would have been – I don't know how long the conversation lasted. Might have lasted 5 minutes, might have lasted an hour. I have no idea. But I would have really, really been interested to hear that. It's happened a couple of times in my career where I've either had to ask a question about somewhere that I was going to work, or somebody asked me a question about somewhere that I had worked previously. And they're really, really candid conversations. You feel like you can really tell the story. I would have been fascinated to hear that. Here's the thing with Alabama that is surprising to me, and it's been surprising all year. You don't expect a Nick Saban team to beat themselves. And not that the one game that they lost was them beating themselves as much as, Hendon Hooker and Jalen Hyatt and all those guys, and it was just a magical night at Tennessee. But Alabama helped with the number of penalties and turnovers. I don't expect a Nick Saban team to make those kind of mistakes. We talked at the beginning of the show, we were talking about the Saints win. Why did the Saints win yesterday? Well, they went a long way towards not beating themselves. For once, they didn't turn the ball over, and they had 5 penalties for 27 yards. This is from a team that is at the bottom of the NFL in both of those, at or near the bottom in both of those statistics. You don't expect that Alabama would have gained the fewest turnovers in the SEC, but they have. I expect a Nick Saban defense to be aggressive and attacking, that they take the ball away. This group doesn't, though at least they haven't so far. They put Eli Ricks in the game last week against Mississippi State, and he certainly had a good game, but that's 1 out of 11. They have 6 takeaways in 8 games. That's not something that you expect from a Nick Saban team that is last in the league. And they're -4 overall in the turnover ratio. That's 11th in the league. You don't expect that either. And you certainly don't expect the Nick Saban coach team to lead the league in penalties, but they do. They're 12th in yardage, but they're dead last in overall penalties. Sounds like a bizarro statistic, right? Who's last in the league in penalties? Well, I don't know who is, but it can't be Alabama. Yeah, it is. Who's last in the league in takeaways? I don't know. It can't be Alabama. Yeah, it is. Blame it on whatever you want to blame it on. I don't have a theory that explains everything. Is it a little bit transfers coming in? Maybe. Is it different personnel that just doesn't get it the way he usually does? The shot, I think, that a lot of people will remember in the Tennessee game, because it's been memed to death, is Saban going crazy on the turnover on the punt. Well, yeah, because you just don't expect that Alabama would make that kind of mistake, that they would allow a turnover on a punt on what is a very routine play. Just get out of the way. We're not asking you to cover an All-American receiver or block an All-American defensive end. We're asking you to get out of the way of the bouncing football, and they didn't do that, and it was costly. You don't expect those things from Saban teams. Why were they in a 1-point game with Texas and a 2-point game with Texas A&M? And why did they allow Arkansas? They had on the mat. Whenever you see Alabama up 4 touchdowns, game's over. Nobody ever gets back in the game when they're down 4 touchdowns to Alabama. Arkansas did. They lost, but they did. You don't see the sideline making a clock error like they did at the end of the Tennessee game. Why did Hendon Hooker have time for 2 more throws? Well, because Alabama left them time on the clock. Those are not the mistakes. They have made more uncharacteristic mistakes of that program than they have, really, in my opinion, any year since 2010, which was the last time Saban lost more than 2 games in a year. Does it mean that they'll do it this Saturday? It does not. I wish it did. It might, though. You are what your record says you are. They're still really, really good, but they're making mistakes at a higher rate than they normally do.